Hello, good morning and welcome to the latest in City Magazine's series of free-to-attend webinars. I'm Katie Searles, City reporter and your host for today's session, which is sponsored by IOKI, the smart mobility unit of German railway company Deutsche Bahn. Today's webinar will examine DRT, or Demand Responsive Transport, a form of shared mobility for groups travelling where vehicles such as taxis, buses and minibuses alter their routes based on particular transport demand rather than using a fixed route or timetable. Specifically, we are going to look at how this promising building block of modern mobility can be successfully integrated into existing public transport frameworks, benefiting both local authorities and public transport providers alike, who face a raft of challenges from designing and evaluating tenders to benchmarking DRT services and setting up DRT operations. Providing insight into this topic today is Alina Schuprin, International Business Development Manager at IOKI, and her colleague Hartwig Bose, who is responsible for evaluating the implications of DRT for public transport at IOKI. Together, they will explain how IOKI can successfully integrate DRT solutions seamlessly into existing public transport frameworks, providing practical examples of integrated DRT services and explain the process, potential and results of database mobility analytics to enable efficient, sustainable and customer-friendly mobility solutions. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll pose as many of these questions as possible to Elena and Hartwig in the time available following the presentation. Also, a recording of this webinar will be available to view on demand from tomorrow afternoon via www.citymagazine.co.uk. And with that, I'll now hand over to Elena and Hartwig to start the presentation section of this webinar.
Yes, hello everyone. And also thank you for all your interest that you have in our webinar. And also thank you to John, Daniel, Robert and Katie from the City Magazine for having us today. We are very much looking forward to the next 60 minutes. And within the first 35 to 40 minutes, we give you an insight about the exciting world of mobility analytics and show you also how powerful this tool is when it comes to planning and implementation of successful DRT services. In the last third of today's webinar, we are also looking forward to then receive all your questions and also get your feedback and also discuss the questions together with you. Yes, starting with the question, who are we? We are IOKI and we are based in Frankfurt. We are a technology partner for transport service operators, for local government bodies, and also for companies in urban areas and also in rural areas. And what we do is we create smart mobility solutions. So we help our partners to digitize existing traffic. This can be scheduled traffic, on-demand traffic, but also mixed traffic. And we also help to implement new mobility solutions. We always aim to integrate on-demand services that complement public transport systems and improve the mobility offers and therefore strengthen the public transport system and overall. Yeah, we are also a wholly owned subsidiary of the Deutsche Bahn Group. The Deutsche Bahn Group is the leading pan-European public transport operator and is also present in 14 countries. The Deutsche Bahn also transports 12.8 million passengers daily. And because we are carrying the Deutsche Bahn DNA, we also do understand the pain points of public transport and also know how to do strategic transport planning. What we also do understand is what needs to be done in order to meet the needs of today's customers. And whenever you need to integrate new forms of transport, you have to make sure that it's really integrated into the existing public transport system and instead of having them operating in parallel. So we do not want to cannibalize any existing public transport system, and we also want to avoid additional traffic on the roads. And we actually want to be a public transport feeder and be a perfect complementary solution to it and make the public transport stronger. Yeah, we do this with our holistic tool sets for driver-based and autonomous driving. So we have here the mobility analytics and consulting part, which Hartwig will explain you more in detail later on. And we also have the operating system, which consists of the passenger app, the driver app, as well as the control center, which is actually the administrative tool, so our partners can manage on-demand services in the background. Yeah, and of course, you can start with just implementing the on-demand service, but we always suggest to apply mobility analytics beforehand, because you will stumble about many other questions that comes along your way. So you will ask yourself, what is the mobility behavior of the people? And also you will probably ask yourself how to efficiently run the public transport, or if your public transport is actually efficient currently. Another question could be how you can reduce the environmental impact of your transport system, and also how to improve the economic viability as well. Another question could be how to increase the attractiveness of public transport, and also what type of region is best suited to a DRT service. And by answering these questions, we enable our partners to successfully implement DRT services that are fully integrated into the existing public transport system. And this Hartwig will now explain to you how we are actually doing all this.
Hello, my name is Hartwig Possum. I'm in charge of the algorithms that run in the hidden at Yoki, as well as in the planning of DRT, as partially in the dispatch itself. And I will tell you a bit of the story, how we actually put a functioning DRT into practice from greenfield theory. So we have several challenges on our hand, and the main challenge is actually, should we implement DRT service in your local area? That is what you are asking, but behind the scenes, we ourselves are asking an additional plethora of questions. We are asking, can DRT actually increase the usage, respectively the modal split, in favor of the current system? Can DRT also increase your financial viability of the current service? And how competitive and how will DRT compete with the current service? So our solution is an evaluation of an integrated DRT, and we do a fully evaluation. We do not do rough OD matrices, and we do not do rough calculations and sketchy calculations, but we simulate a whole system down to the very last bit, down to the very last driver and user. So I would like to show you what we are essentially doing concerning this, and give you a glimpse of the tool, into the tools that we are using. So first at hand, we might look at a small constituency. On the left-hand side, you see the bus service running. On the right-hand side, for comparison, we have a DRT service. The system is a spoke and hub system where buses are converging to a major hub, which is the train station, for a rendezvous. And while your buses are all in the middle of the city, the rest of the city is unserved on the left-hand side, while on the right-hand side, the DRTs are crisscrossing and serving every request that is popping up on in your city. And you might now say, okay, now I understand, DRT can serve me better. Well, look to the right, there's a car going down to the bottom, and it just behaves like a bus. The reason being, well, this is a service that uses stations, and so the DRT vehicles follow the stations, and the vehicles will follow the bus route to the south, very much so like a bus. And this is an ineffective DRT, because on a bus, the people will actually pool by themselves. They will queue and they will find themselves pooled inside of the bus. So maybe I just take the audio, if that is okay for you. And yeah. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so you might now say DRT is a better solution, or ask yourself, maybe bus is the better solution in some points, but these questions, which solution is better, are actually not at the core of what we want to investigate. We rather want to investigate where and when is DRT a solution for your system. So the question of better becomes a question of quality, and there are two qualities you can measure. We can actually ask ourselves, what happens with same cost? If we have the same cost as a PT service company, can we have a higher quality of transport? That might be a question a constituency wants to ask. So also we can ask, if you want to keep your transportation offer at the same service quality, can we do this at a lower cost? This is maybe a question you as a PT provider want to ask yourself, and we will answer them gladly both at the same time, I might say. So what we actually do is we start from scratch, from an area to an operational service. And we do not leave you with an idea or a sketchy path to success, but we do hand over to our customer success division, which will help you put our sketch into an operational service. For this, we have a chain of tools that we employ. First, we simulate demand. Then we evaluate transportation options for each and every single one of your demand in your area. Then we find areas for DRT integration, and we design an operation for these areas, and we evaluate the financial performance. And I have to be a bit more specific here. We do not evaluate the financial performance. We evaluate a whole lot more for a lot of scenarios. Because as you can think of, as you may already have guessed, there are several ways to actually integrate a DRT into your area. You can do that time-wise, say from 8 o'clock in the evening to 6 o'clock in the morning, I'll have a DRT. You can do that area-wise. You can say this certain constituency part of my service area is not going to be serviced well from the bus, and we can actually put a DRT there. This tool chain is centered, has a centerpiece, which is the simulated transportation demand. And I'm with Yoki since the very beginning, and I'm pretty proud of what we thought of, because the idea of this whole shebang is that you can start at any point you want. So you can start from scratch and say, I have no idea what's going on in my constituency, tell me. Then we'll simulate transportation demand, evaluate transportation options, and find areas for DRT integration. You can say, I already have a DRT running. What can you do for you? Well, what can we do for you? Well, you have a DRT running. You know where your customers are. Let's work on your operations design and find out how your financial performance will change. So we start with a very detailed knowledge of the population, one that you cannot get by counting people in your buses, because we see everyone, even those who take the bike to work, who would walk to their kindergarten, and those who will use their car throughout the year. We see them all. How do we do this? Well, we go ahead like this. We calculate a simulated mobility. Then we evaluate your existing bus service and simulate your existing bus service to evaluate it. From that, we do, with our traffic knowledge, in a knowledgeable fashion, we design areas where we could implement a DRT, and then we calculate the operational figures. We care for details. I said we do not do OD matrices. We do microscopic mobility demand. We know each and every person in the constituency on a simulated basis. To get to our results, we will look at 30 different data sources. We will model 500,000 inhabitants. No matter how big your constituency is, we will need the surrounding to know what is going on in the center. We will look at around 1.5 million individual trips, and we will evaluate 7.5 million individual travel options, and we will look at a lot of operational scenarios. While the average customer can only think about waiting time, we have a lot of parameters that we can vary. We can vary the distance of your virtual stations. We can vary the time we let your passenger use to step into his car. And at the end of the day, once we're done with calculation, we will have dispatched around 80 million dispatched passengers. So roughly the size of Germany, a bit like the size of Great Britain, we will have put them through virtual DRTs. That is how we use precise micromobility. Where do we get it from? So we do this for a living, so we are very precise about this. As inbound data, we use social demographic and geographical data that is usually publicly available. We also obtain travel diaries from household surveys, and so we get social demographics into our system, and we use passenger flows from anonymized mobile data. So as a layman, you would say, well, if we look at mobile data, why don't we take that and just work from there? The point is, the word anonymized. We do not get a single person transportation on mobile data. We get chunks and OD matrices. And from this, we mathematicians call this to impute. We take an aggregation and we recompute the population from there. The process is we create a synthetic population with social demographic characteristics, which fits all surveys that we put into our process. Then we assign residencies. So we find out which people live where. For example, we will evaluate the house market to find prices to put social demographic people with higher income into higher costing residencies. Then we will assign mobility behavior. So we know what social demographic one person has, and we find out which frequency of travel he has, which routes he will take, which departure times, which means of transportation he will use, he or she will use, and which destinations he might travel to. Finally, we determine start destination and end destination points of our journeys with precise coordinates. So we don't fiddle around guessing, we actually calculate something that replicates mobility in your region. As a result, we get a pretty close microscopic image of the traffic demand, and we can start evaluating market opportunities by knowing who wants to travel from where to where. What does this look like as a start? The input data might look like this. This is an example from Berlin. Here you see the whole PT net of Berlin, which is also part of our input. In Berlin, we have around above 10 million daily trips, 75,000 above our daily PT trips. And what we do is we not only simulate everybody who's taking part in this game, but also simulate how they get to work and how this which mode of transportation they're taking. So let's take a look into Berlin. So this is the morning peak. People are traveling to work. What you see are the people using their own cars. The people in public transportation are invisible in this simulation here. And we get, although each single route might be slightly off from reality, we get a pretty good picture of the total mobility. We can even recreate traffic jams on the roads, and we can refine all the noise pollution that you in your city will find. So we, in total, we get an overview over the total mobility in the whole region, which helps us understand what is going on specifically in the area of interest. Now, area of interest, I took the liberty of looking into Frankfurt. So I'm pretty proud. This is data from today morning. This is simulation of this particular Wednesday with this particular weather, with this particular time of year. And if we zoom into our transport situation, we say at 8:45, people commuting to work. And if we take a close look at what is happening here, we can stop one of our constituents and ask him, who are you? And he will tell us, in this case, it's a male person, age 30 to 45. He is a large city dweller who has never owned a car. Resemblances to me are kind of the fun joke of my colleagues. So the income seems to be high. I can't really confirm nor deny that. And this guy is on his way to work, and we will know now that he is a classic candidate for a service. He is not the typical candidate for a typical route to work because he does not own a car in Germany. But if you want to find out if DRT works for you in a specific setting, looking at averages is not a solution. So we have to look at every kink in the possible transportation world, and this is a particular kink. Here's somebody who bikes to work in Germany, who takes a supporting train ride together with his bike to finalize his workday at a shopping location and then even bikes home. Again, I can neither confirm nor deny that this is what I'm going to do. But if you look at this closely, you can see where there is an opportunity for a DRT setting. If this person could actually DRT to work or DRT home or partially DRT home, he might leave his bike at home in winter. So once we've looked at all this detailed mobility behavior, all these choices of mode, we get a detailed overview of mobility, and we use that to spot service opportunities. How do we do that? On the left-hand side, we know mobility need at a stunning detail. In the middle, we have loads of mobility options to evaluate. Here I present two: the classic German, go to work by car, and the other classic German, go to work by public transportation and take several changes in the immediate. And of course, we examine all those existing modes of transport in addition to those not yet existing. So we examine feedering to a PT service with a DRT, or feedering away from a PT service with a DRT, or even feedering the first mile and the last mile. And we do this according to the Yoki rules of engagement. We do not cannibalize. So that means we will not take some customer to a public transport, we will not transport a customer parallel to an existing transportation service in public transport. We will simply not offer that option. You might ask, well, but if your person enters a DRT, he might tell you he wants to go straight to work. You should take him to the PT. Well, that's what we do. In our real existing product, we implement stops and barriers so that you cannot be transported parallel to a driving bus. And with all the mobility options that we examine this feature pretty closely because it's in our DNA. From this, we get a spatial and time-wise resolution of what people are actually wanting to do with their mobility demand. So we have a very complicated formula, and I spare you this as a mathematician because algebra is probably not your fun subject on a Wednesday morning, but rest assured, we just do not do the following. We do not take travel time or transit counts and say, well, from this we infer. But we do a whole lot more. We take the social demographics of your person. We take the cost of the transportation he's going to choose. We take all the stops he'll have to make, the duration, and we'll ask, is this worthwhile for you taking this public transport, or will you take your car? And we get a sound answer from our simulated inhabitant, and he will tell us what choice he makes according to our choice function. He will either choose the car, he might choose the public transportation in turquoise here, or he might choose the feeder shuttle to the public transport and go from home to work using a mix of new mobility and old school public transportation. In the end, this will look like this: a visually totally overwhelming plethora of data showing what is going on in your city when, because, and I have to really emphasize this, it's not about where, it's about where and when. So this is a view on the city. The points in dark green show you an attractiveness for a DRT feeder. And if you say, well, I can't really get what is going on here, let's pause this and look at this in aggregation, just as usual humans would do. In the next slide, we see a city with red spotted public transportation stops, which we choose to happen as feeder stops. Here we see areas of attractive public transportation. So people are happy with public transport wherever you see dark green. And here on the right-hand side, to the west, you see a tail of stations dragging out into the wild open of the suburban area of Berlin, in this case. And you see small oases of people being happy with public transport. This is where housing is expensive. This is where people live, and they still travel far into the city, and they live in dense areas, and just neighboring 500 meters away, public transport is a whole different story. But to the naked eye, invisible, there's also other special area of interest. In the middle of the city, there's an area well covered by public transportation where people are not happy with public transport. So to understand what's going on here, let's look up at a hypothetical mode of transportation, feeder. So this is where people would love to be feedered to a DRT situation, and they won't walk to the public transport situation, but they would use a DRT. First of all, your tail will extend far into the suburban area. So when you talk with your constituency, that is a big selling point. You actually bring public transport literally to the area. If you look into the city, the small spot that we looked at, there's the anomaly here. There is a want for DRT feeder, although there's a big train line going through. When we analyze what's going on there, well, guess what? This is a train line that is pretty short that will take you into the center, and it will add a whopping 0.9 transfers to your already 1.2 average transfers if you travel with public transportation in Berlin. Yes, we know such numbers because they are important for us. So we could figure out that this train line, while existent, is not really any helpful for public transport. Adding a DRT feeder will take the people away from this train line. So this is something we have to take into account and discuss with constituencies and PT service companies, because this might cause cannibalization, which we will not allow to happen. From this all, we derive areas where a DRT feeder could be attractive and would mix in well, blend in well into the existing transportation system. But we don't stop at that. We tell you how much will your modal split change. We now know everybody and his travel options before introducing the feeder and after introducing the feeder, and now we can calculate a new modal split after we introduce a DRT feeder without introducing it. And why is this helpful? Well, if you talk to your neighboring PT companies, you might tell them, I'm going to introduce a DRT service. We will all pay for this. And they will tell you, well, we won't, because you're increasing the service quality for your customers and increasing our prices. What are you doing? And we tell you, well, we can see how many constituency will drop the car in favor of the new PT or in favor of the DRT, because we know. Because we look at the map and see the spatial change in market share, the temporal change in market share, and the aggregated change in market share, we can tell you who will change mode from where to where. So that brings us all into calculating DRT effectiveness. At a short recap, we know what's going on in the transport market. We can simulate what's going on in current situation. From that, we derive with our traffic experts various operational scenarios for integrated DRT, and then we calculate operation figures for these simulations. And rest assured, we do not do this lightheartedly. When we say we simulate various options, we simulate them down to the very last person for a very long set of virtual days, actually a full virtual month of transportation, so that we can be sure that we know what we're talking about. What's the outcome? Let's look at the example, constant cost versus higher quality of transportation, and go back to our small constituency. On the left-hand side, you see lots of red dots. These are requests from passengers who want to be transported by bus, and they cannot be answered within 10 minutes by the existing bus service. You might say, well, 10 minutes, nobody who goes with a bus in a small constituency will expect that quick service. Well, if you look on the right-hand side, a DRT with the same service quality promise will cover all the turquoise requests in this specific time frame. So we have on the right-hand side the same amount of vehicles as on the left-hand side. The only difference is on the left-hand side is people read a schedule, go to the bus stop, and are unhappy how long they have to wait. On the right-hand side, they press a button, the button tells them when the car will arrive, and they're taken to the place they want to. There's no difference in stations, there's no difference in vehicles, there's no difference in operational hours. It's pretty much the same, but keep in mind, This is a low density setting. So this is happening at a time where buses are not properly are not overrun by school kids or by the morning peak. If we look at the details for a customer, it will look like this. Travel time is on the left-hand side, and you see the pinkish line for the DRT average travel time will significantly peak earlier. So people wait less, while the blue line of the bus service waiting time peaks later. And sorry, this is not waiting time, this is travel time, sorry, travel time. And the reason is people go directly. So travel time is shorter, they do not go via the main hub, but they go like crisscross and travel time drops. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that over 70% of the inhabitants, for over 70% of the inhabitants, the DRT is more than 5 minutes faster than the bus. So waiting time dropped and transportation time dropped at the same cost. And again, this is a place and time that is specific to this constituency. So just saying bluntly, now I understand buses in a small town don't work, is really not getting the picture. So let's do the other question, which actually seems more interesting. Constant customer quality and lower cost. What do we mean by constant customer quality? We mean the following. We do not design the DRT such that it fails at its own success, which you can easily do. You can put up a nighttime DRT which resembles a taxi, picks up the people in 5-minute intervals and travels them directly to their destination, and you will be overrun because you are a cheap taxi all of a sudden. So constant customer quality is not something that we take lightheartedly as well. We don't want to improve customer quality so that you get overwhelmed, but we also don't want to drop it. We don't want to make your system super unattractive. So what do we measure? We measure travel time and waiting time, and how likely is your passenger going to stay within your system, because we have a function for calculating how happy your customer is with the current situation. So the situation concerning keeping cost low while keeping customers happy is a bit more complicated. It really depends on how effective your system already is and how much customers you have. On the right-hand side, you see a diagram implementing passenger resilience on the x-axis, something that might be new to you, but is a constant to us. Passenger resilience is how long is your passenger willing to wait. You might think of a city person who looks at his watch when the bus is 5 minutes late. And you can imagine the same on the city side, countryside, where somebody is going to the bus stop and already lighting a cigarette, although he knows the bus is coming in 5 minutes, because it's not. And depending on how resilient your passengers are, you get more passenger load. So if your passengers are willing to wait a lot, your system will be full and the DRT will be challenged. If your passengers are not willing to wait a lot, your passengers will be few in your bus system, so your DRT can easily serve them. So keep in mind, this is a comparison between new service and existing bus service. And what we do for a living is, here's the line of bus cars that you need. And on the y-axis, we plot how many DRT cars do you need to replace the bus service. If load if passenger load is low, you need, of course, fewer DRT vehicles than buses. If load is high, you might get into the situation where DRT cars are overrun and the system is not profitable for you and the system is not making the customers happy. So the situation here is a mere, it depends. At constant customer quality, the necessary DRT fleet will increase with PT passenger load, and we will calculate that for you specifically tailor-made for your area. So I'll have to leave it at that. I'll have to promise you that we are able to calculate this in depth and tell you how we integrate this into this DRT service into your bus service. I've talked to a lot of bus companies in the time at Yoki, and I get the same questions all over. One is, do I have to buy new buses? And the answer is no. You may, but if you want to, we will calculate the cost and benefits and tell you in which year you will have made profit for the first time with your new cars. We do not calculate a high in the sky optimistic solution. We design our DRT as an integration to your existing features. So we take your PT fleet and design our DRT around it. So how do we join DRT into your PT and make this mix effective? That's a piece of cake. Because once we show you performance overview, we have all the data to drill down to the very last vehicle. We know which vehicle with which license plate will be on the road when to exactly make the performance happen that we calculate for you. We will already have calculated if higher performance or lower cost is attractive to you. We will already have calculated how the modal split has changed because we needed to tell you what performance is going to happen. So if you ask us, and can I integrate this into my existing service? The answer is yes, we already did. Because we looked at detailed operations design, and once the performance, once you put a finger on a number in the performance overview, we will drill down and tell you the operations concept behind that so that you can verify that this is actually achievable. So what we do for a living is we take inbound data, which is publicly available, we calibrate it with mobile phone data, and we take your current line trip design, the vehicle rosters you have, and the cost and revenue rates you have, and the cost and revenue rates we know that happen in DRT. Our process is to design a DRT service area, detect new bus trip designs that could enhance the system, and replace them by a optional DRT or a time-wise DRT or a area DRT, area-bound DRT. We do a complete calculation of all feasible operational configurations, even those that you will not implement, because we want to tell you what happens if you chose to change that significant parameter. If that matters or not, we will know it in the end. The results are that we end up with a clear picture of customer quality, product quality, operational performance, and for each of these we have key performance indicators, and because we made this specifically to be reused, this process, we can actually do this on an existing service, and we do so. We actually do this process with our existing services. We calibrate our data that we calculate on the vehicles that we have on the ground to be sure that the promises we make are actually promises we can keep. So we will reveal to you hidden cost drivers that you never thought of that happen, and we will show you how they impact your service, even if your service is already running, and we will identify the ideal product configuration together with you, whether your product is already up and running or if your product is in planning and still a dream to come true. So that is what we do in MAC. And maybe I've been bragging a bit too much about what we're able to, but trust me, as a village kid, I'm pretty proud of what we're doing here, because I've been sitting in one of those buses going to school, and my parents are using them to go shopping, and it takes them an hour, while a DRT would shuttle them in 15 minutes. So I do that for a living, and I do that because I love it. Thank you very much. So I hand over to Alina again.
Awesome. Can you turn off your things? Okay. Sorry for that. I hope you can all understand me well. Yeah, I was laughing for Hartwig's stories, because I actually also had the same issue when I was a kid. I'm also a village kid, and it took me forever to visit my friends. And if I would have a DRT service, that would have been much easier, actually. Yeah, and I'm also always impressed when it comes to mobility analytics and what's actually what you can do with it. So I actually brought to you the perfect example, what happens if you apply mobility analytics first and then implement the DRT service. So yeah, here is the project I was talking about. This is the project Aoki Hamburg. We actually did together with our partner, the transport operator VHH. It's an on-demand service. Like I said, we brought on the road after applying mobility analytics. And with the analysis we carried out in Hamburg, we actually were able to identify suitable areas where DRT services would actually add in value to the region, and where it would be possible to actually increase the attractiveness also of the public transport system. So yeah, Aoki Hamburg was a great success so far. We transported 400,000 passengers since the kickoff in 2018, and the reuse rate was about 87%. We even won the German Mobility Award together with our partner. To give you some details about the project, the service is highly integrated into the existing public transport system. And whenever passengers want to use the Ayoki, they can always use the public transport ticket for using it. There are 20 emission-free electric shuttles that run 24/7 in order to get the people from A to B and on flexible routes. And whenever there are similar routes that the passengers want to take, the system is automatically bundling these trips into carpools and transports the people together. The cars are also barrier-free, which is quite awesome because it makes life much easier for everyone that has to sit in a wheelchair. Another special thing about this project is that this project got evaluated by the Institute for Transport Planning and Logistics of the Technical University in Hamburg. And this evaluation took place in 2018, so right after the kickoff of the project, and also 1 year later. So what the survey actually showed us is that 1/4 of the passengers that are using Ayoki are actually replacing the trip by car with the Ayoki shuttle. So, and what was even more interesting to us, that the number of users that has access to this car, to their own car, this number also increased from 2018 to 2019. Another showing was that 50% of the passengers, they use the Ayoki shuttle on a daily basis, and also the proportion of over 60s increased within the first year from 2.3 to 6%. What other things did the survey reveal? Here we have one good example that the importance of DRT increased within these 2 years, and also that the people, they trust more in our service, because we can say that because in 2018, there were only 47% that actually used short-term bookings and spontaneous bookings. So they rather did the pre-booking feature. And 1 year later, it was already at 78%. So this shows, like I said, that the people really trust in our service, that they are on time to the destination they want to travel to. Another finding was that 75% of the passengers, they use the Ayoki shuttle in order to get to or from a major public transport stop. And also 88% of all passengers, they use the public transport season ticket. So all these numbers again show that the service in general is perfectly integrated into the overall transport offer, and that the Ayoki shuttle also acts like a feeder for public transport, and that it also increases the attractiveness of the PT system in general, and that it is highly accepted by the users that want to drive with Ayoki. And as I said in the beginning, we always aiming for solutions that are making the public transport system stronger. And I think with these numbers, and especially also with the passengers we transported, we could show that we are actually capable of doing this with mobility analytics and also with our on-demand platform. Yeah, besides Ayoki Hamburg, we also have other projects on the road. With partners all around Europe. As you can see, we are a white label solution, so our partners can choose about the logo, the colors, the languages, and also other configurations. We are actually market leader in the DACH region, and we also expanded to other European countries, such as the UK. So in Watford, people can order minibuses via the app Arriva Click. And in Spain, Malaga, we are partnering with MoveMe. These two projects and also the Ayoki Hamburg projects, they're perfect examples for suburban projects. Here our partners, they are actually able to reduce the journey times of their passengers, and they are also able to increase cost efficiency and also the utilization level of their cars, especially through intelligent pooling. And when we are looking at the rural areas, here our partners, they actually reduce the cost-intensive empty runs and also the gaps in their operating hours. And they also noticed that through the modern order function, so the passengers, they don't have to call their on-demand lines and share taxis. They were also able to see that they were a number of users. One example here is the bus payroll system. And because we also want that employees can travel from one office building to the other, we also offer B2B solutions. So one example here is the telecom shuttle, which operates in different German cities. And talking about covering the last mile problem, here also we brought first projects on the road when it comes to autonomous on-demand services as well. And yeah, we are always happy if we could communicate and talk about, discuss with you. If you also want to be part of our story, if you want to become also one of our partners and bring on-demand services on the road together with us, and also apply mobility analytics, as we suggested beforehand, to make it even more successful. And I think now we still have 15 minutes time to answer questions that you have, to get a feedback from you. And yeah, I had fun so far, so quite excited what you have to ask to us.
Elena Hartvig, thank you very much for that fascinating presentation. And as Elena said, that leads us nicely into the Q&A section of the webinar. I'm pleased to say we've had a few questions come in. Any ones that we cannot answer in the 15 minutes we have left, we will send them over to you. So you mentioned the Watford Borough Council project. John has asked, can you tell us more about the Arriva Click DRT service? Any lessons learned from that project?
Yeah, actually, Arriva, Watford case, Arriva Click. So we partner here with the operator Arriva UK Bus PLC. The whole service started in July 2020, and the whole service is mainly focused on optimization of the connection points between the train station, for example, Watford Junction, and also other points of interests when it comes to, for example, the city center, or also the tourist attractions. Improvements that we have here is, for example, that we were able to increase 38% of the requests, and that we are also able to increase 47% of the rides, and also able to increase 45% of the passengers that are actually using the service. And one benefit that Watford has is actually that people are able to do a pre-booking. So their seats that they are reserving is 100% secure, and also the passengers, they don't get a denial for their reserved seat. Exactly.
Thank you very much. And for a driver's point of view, how do drivers hop from bus to DRT, and how do you calculate this?
Shall I?
Yes, you can.
Can I have that question again? Sorry.
Yes, of course. So how do drivers hop from bus to DRT, and how do you calculate that?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, there is something I have to add to this. In some cases, it really is not necessary to hop from one vehicle to another as a driver, because we try to keep your fleet as vigilant as possible. So we will use any mini buses you already have in an intermediate mode between bus and DRT service. But also, we do take this into account if we switch vehicles on a driver. So essentially, as I said, we really drill down to the very last vehicle. So we simulate really how the driver shifts are working, and we adapt that to the rules that you have in your constituency. Essentially, what it boils down to is that we try to optimize the handover times for the driver, and integrate a driver task list into what we think is the best solution for the vehicle task list. So in that case, we try to, we will optimize the driver task list to fit what is happening as a DRT and bus mix. But essentially, the main message is mostly drivers will not switch vehicles, they will just switch modes, and they will use the same app essentially when they drive as a bus and when they drive as a DRT. There is no difference for the driver. The app will tell him what to actually do next.
Thank you, Hartwig. What is the difference of demand-based versus demand-responsive? Elena, you're still muted, sorry.
Like this. Can you please repeat this question again? I think it was because I only heard one part of the question.
Yes, of course. What is the difference of demand-based versus demand-responsive?
So for demand responsive, it is generally user-oriented passenger transport, which is also characterized by flexible routes and small vehicles mainly. And the main benefit is that the people can share the rides and also get picked up and dropped off at the location that the operator decided before. And for demand responsive transport, it's very essential that it is passenger needed based. So it responds to the passenger needs. And when we are talking about passenger demand based, we are more talking about that the transport operator is adapting their system to the demand. For example, in the peak hours in the morning, when all the people go to work, they would take a bus, or they would actually let the bus run to a specific area, or from a specific area to a specific time. And maybe during the nighttime, this bus wouldn't even run. So it is more like they would plan the bus lines regarding to the demands that there are.
Thank you very much. And has COVID-19 had any impact on DRT services? What is the long-term impact that the coronavirus could have?
I think Hartwig just wanted to add something to the last question.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that usually there's a common misconception about DRT in the sense of that people say, well, if my passenger has to book it just in time, he will not get the same service in peak hours. And one of the learnings that Alina mentioned, and that is important in the difference between demand responsive and demand centered transportation, is people learn. And actually in our, as you've seen in our data, a lot of people start pre-booking rides when they use the DRT to get to work. So one of the important questions that I get a lot is, will my passengers have the same service quality when they use DRT? And the answer is yes, because they learn to pre-book a DRT if they know that this is really important to them.
Thank you, Hartwig. So just to pose that last question again, what impact has COVID-19 had on DRT services?
Yeah, we noticed, like I think everyone noticed, that the digitalization of today's world came up quite fast. Everyone is now used to using digital apps or also other modes of communicating. And so this is actually quite an advantage also when it comes to DRT services, because through our app and also our solution, the system is quite flexible in general. So it can adapt to every given situation, also when it comes to turning off the pooling, also regarding the COVID situation, and also how to reduce the seats. So the operator can actually decide if they want to reduce the seats. And also what I mentioned before, the people are actually used to now communicate and also use digital functions. So they are also used to now use an app. And what we do in general in order to tackle the situation with COVID-19 is that we consult our partners also how to manage all these difficult situations, also when it comes to wearing the masks in the cars and how to clean the masks, how to clean the cars. And also what we do is Aoki Cares. So this is like a pop-up project that we offer in order that people that work in system-relevant jobs, that they are getting to their jobs for free, for example. So this is like our overall experience that we did with COVID-19 and the situation around DRT.
Thank you very much, Elena. Does Aoki have any plans to roll out similar DRT services in other UK towns and cities?
Yes, we do have, for sure. Watford should be only the beginning, I think. We see great potentials, especially when it comes to suburban areas, because here we notice that there are many regions in this areas where the people highly demand on cars. And this also causes high low air quality and congestions, traffic, and also stress to the people. So in these areas, DRT would definitely make sense, but also in the rural areas, people do not really have access to the public transport. And here we could also help because we could operate as a feeder for the public transport in general.
Thank you very much. And maybe one final question. Does DRT mean customers no longer rely on a proper service?
Yeah, this one is for everyone that is afraid that he cannot plan their days. And with one of our main features, and that's really one very important feature, is the pre-booking feature. So people can actually book 1 hour before, 1 day before, 3 days before, 10 days before, but up to 14 days before, so they can actually plan their journeys, their travels. And this feature is also included in our service, so in our standard product. And this makes life, much more predictable.
Well, that brings us nicely to the end of this webinar. I would like to thank both Elena and Hartvig for joining us this morning. I'd also like to thank Aoki once again for sponsoring today's webinar, which will be available to view on demand from tomorrow afternoon via citymagazine.co.uk, in case you'd like to refer back to the presentation or share it with a colleague. Before we part company, I'd like to bring attention to the next City webinar, which will take place on December the 8th. And focus on some of the e-scooter trials currently taking place across the UK. Join us then as an expert panel of micromobility operators and local authorities involved in the trial schemes discuss lessons learned, explain how to ensure cost efficiency, and debate whether this new mobility solution will be a permanent implementation following the end of the trials next year. Micromobility operators interested in sponsoring this webinar should contact Robert Googe on 0208 065 0465 or email robert.googe@acabomedia.co.uk. Local councils interested in speaking should contact City Editor John Thornton on 0208 037 1783 or at johnthornton@acabomedia.co.uk. That's it. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. I'm Katie Searles and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Kelty.
Thank you.
Fine.